Have you ever stopped to think about how your voice, which is just a smooth, continuous sound wave, gets understood by your smartphone, a device that only gets ones and zeros? I mean, our world is totally analog, but all our cool tech is digital. So how do they talk to each other? Well, today, we're going to bridge that gap.
Just look at this. On the left, you've got your classic analog signal. Think of a sound wave. It's smooth, it's continuous, it's got an infinite number of values along that curve. But then, over on the right, you've got the digital version. It's blocky, it's chunky, it's made of separate, distinct steps. It's like trying to draw a perfect circle using only Lego bricks. They're two completely different languages, so how do you translate one into the other?
Well, let me introduce you to the hero of our story. It's the unsung translator working inside pretty much every single gadget you own. It's called the Analog to Digital Converter, or, ADC for short. And this tiny little circuit has one mission, one incredibly important job.
So what's its job description? Basically, it takes a real-world thing, like the voltage coming from a microphone when you speak, and it turns it into a digital number. A string of ones and zeros that a computer can actually understand and work with. It's the essential interpreter in the conversation between our reality and the digital one.
Okay, so how does this little bit of magic actually happen? It's not magic, of course. It's a process, and it all boils down to these three steps: sampling, quantization, and encoding. Let's break down each one step by step.
All right, first up is sampling. The ADC has to look at that constantly changing, flowing analog wave and somehow capture its essence. So what this really means is that the ADC takes measurements of the analog signal's height, its amplitude, at super regular, precise moments in time. We're effectively turning this continuous river of information into a series of distinct individual data points. A really good way to picture this is to imagine you're trying to track a ball that's been thrown through the air. You can't capture its entire fluid path at once, right? But what you can do is take a whole bunch of pictures, really, really fast. The more photos you take, the better you can piece together the ball's path. Well, sampling it just like that, but for an electrical signal.
And that, right there, leads us to the most critical question in this whole process. Because if you take those snapshots too slowly, you might totally miss the highest point of the arc, or you might think the ball just teleported from one spot to the next. So how fast is fast enough? Well, luckily, there's a rule for that, and it's a fundamental law in all of digital signal processing. It's called the Nyquist theorem. And it gives us a really clear mathematical guideline. Your sampling rate has to be at least double the highest frequency in the original analog signal. No exceptions.
So here it is, the golden rule. You have to sample more than twice as fast. To put that in perspective, human hearing kind of tops out around 20 kilohertz. So to capture all the sound we can hear, you need to sample it over 40 kilohertz. And that's exactly why CDs use a sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz. If you sample any slower, you literally start throwing away information. It's just gone.
Okay, so we've got our snapshots. We have all these discrete points in time. But there's still a problem. The height of each snapshot is still a super precise, messy analog value. We need to simplify that. And that brings us to step 2, quantization. Quantization is all about approximation. It's the process of taking that exact measurement of each sample and sort of snapping it to the closest value on a predefined ladder of levels. We're taking an infinite range of possible heights and forcing them into a limited, manageable number of steps. Honestly, the absolute easiest way to think about this is just rounding a number. If you measure something and get 7.83 volts, but your system only gets whole numbers, you'd just round it up to 8. If you measured 2.1 volts, you'd round it down to 2. That's it. That's quantization in a nutshell. But, and this is a big but, here's the catch. That rounding process isn't perfect. It introduces a tiny little bit of error. That small difference between the real analog value, like 7.83, and the new digital value, 8, has a name. It's called quantization error. And it's the fundamental trade-off of going digital. The more levels you have, the less error you get. But the more data you have to store. All right, we are on the home stretch. We've taken our snapshots and we've rounded their values to specific levels. The final step is to translate those levels into a language our computers and phones actually speak, the language of ones and zeros. Encoding is basically that final translation step. It's the process where we assign a unique binary code, that's a sequence of ones and zeros, to each and every one of those quantized levels we just created. Think of it like creating a secret code book. We decide that the level 8 will now be called 1000, and maybe the level 2 gets the code 0010. So now, instead of some abstract voltage level, we have a concrete number that a processor can actually read and work with.
And this is exactly how it all comes together. Each one of those distinct amplitude levels gets its own unique binary code. Level 7 becomes 111. Level 6 is now 110, and so on. At this point, that smooth analog signal has been completely translated into the digital world.
So if you just step back and look at the whole picture, this is the mission, this is the goal. Through sampling, quantizing, and encoding, the ADC creates a digital approximation of a real-world signal. A really, really good one, mind you, but an approximation nonetheless. Okay, so we've just gone through a whole lot of technical how, but why does any of this matter? Why should you care? Well, because this completely invisible process is happening all around you all the time, in more places than you could possibly imagine.
Seriously, ADCs are fundamental to modern life. They're in your smartphone, turning your voice into data. They're in that digital thermometer, turning heat into a number on a screen. They are the absolute heart and soul of music recording studios and digital cameras, capturing sound and light. They're in your car, your microwave. They are literally everywhere.
Every single time you use a piece of digital tech that has to measure something from the real world, you are relying on an ADC to do that translation for you. It's the silent, essential, and absolutely critical bridge that makes our digital lives possible.
Which, leaves us with one last big thought. We've seen that the digital version of anything is just an approximation of the real thing, with tiny bits of information lost along the way. So it makes you wonder, if our entire digital world is built on these approximations of reality, what else might be getting lost in translation?